Okay, so here's like a mock exam that I would give, that you guys would theoretically be taking for Unit 4. So what's on it is there's 4 graphs. You've got some inverse trig, finding the equations, domain and range of the inverse trig, and just a couple other like random questions. They got a tangent question where I just ask you to label the stuff, another inverse trig function, and then very similar to the one you had in your review with the current in a circuit question. So I'm going to go through this just so you guys can see everything. The graphs are the graphs. We'll go through them. I'm not going to go into so much detail, but like I've done with the notes, but just so that you can see them. So the amplitude of this guy is 1. This b is 1/2. X over 2 is the same thing as 1/2 x. So period is going to be 2 pi over 1/2 or 4 pi, which means we're going to count by pi. Phase shift or horizontal shift, there is none, and there's no vertical shift. And we're going to flip it. Like I said, I've told you guys this. That should be horizontal shift. All right, so label out pi on the x-axis. We can count by ones on the y. So pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, 4 pi. Oop, I don't know where I wrote 45. 4 pi, negative 2 pi. So on and so forth. And I'm going to give myself some space here on the y-axis because I'm not having any shifts or anything like that. All right, so cosine usually starts high. Sine starts at 0, just so we have them as references. Now cosine starts high. It's flipped, so it's going to start low. The amplitude is still 1. So as opposed to starting at positive 1, I'm going to start at negative 1. And make that pattern just flipped. Now, if it helps you, you can always graph it before the flip and then flip it at the end. But this one, there isn't really too much going on here where I think you would have to do that. You can just flip it initially. Great. So there's your information. So for number 2, amplitude is 2. Period is 2 pi over b. b is 2. This 2, which is just pi. We're going to count by pi over 4. Phase shift or horizontal shift is going to be positive pi over 2. No vertical shift. All right, remember the phase shift or the horizontal shift is where we're going to start. The reason I keep saying phase or horizontal, so some books call it a phase shift. Some books call it a horizontal shift. They are the same thing. I like horizontal shift. So count by pi over 4. My amplitude is 2. There's no vertical shift, but I'm going to count by ones on the y. Okay, so we're going to count by pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, which is pi. We'll go one more. 5 pi over 4, negative pi over 4, negative pi over 2, negative 3 pi over 4, negative pi, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. Now, remember, the horizontal shift is the opposite sign of what's inside, so that's why it's positive pi over 2 that we start at. Okay, so sine starts at 0, 0. So we're going to start on 0, 0, but because we have a horizontal shift, instead of starting at the origin, we're going to start at pi over 2, because that's what my shift is. All right, my amplitude is 2. So I go up, and I'm going to go up 2 units. Go back down to 0, and go down 2 units. You can keep going. The idea is to graph 2 complete cycles, so we're going to just keep going on the other side as well. So just like this. Looks fantastic. And actually, if you kind of look at it, initially, it kind of looks like inverse sine. But that happens depending on what the shift is.